Welcome, everyone, to our spring organizing series. I am so excited to have my colleague Donna Blum with me today. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Nahid. I'm glad to be here.
So, Donna and I go way back, and I have a story to share about her when I started this business. So, this is now over 25 years ago. Donna was also thinking about starting a professional organizing business. In fact, you actually did start one for a little bit, right?
I did. It was called Efficiency by Design.
What was wonderful is because we were friends and because I was starting this coaching business, Donna offered to spend a week with me and help me organize. And I never had the organizing gene, I used to tell myself. Everything felt very cluttered to me. And so Donna spent a week with me helping me organize my house and my office. And when she helped me organize my office, that next week, I was so much more calm and so much more at peace because I could find everything that my revenue started going up immediately. So I wrote an article at the time, how getting organized tripled my revenue. And it was just so powerful to feel the difference between being organized and not being organized, and how on top of everything I was, and how much more confident it made me. And I was actually surprised at that link. And so I would have flown Donna back to California to help me do touch up organization several years after that. Every other organizer I tried to use did not even come close to what I learned from Donna. And one of the reasons is because Donna doesn't only know how to physically organize things, she knows how to explain her principles. And my house still is organized in the way that she got me started 25 years ago. So, Donna, I am so excited to have you. And I would love to ask you what you think makes it so difficult and daunting and overwhelming for people to get organized.
Well, first, I want to share a stat based on what you were just saying about how your productivity increased. So, as I was sort of preparing for our conversation today, I didn't know this beforehand, but there's research that says that up to 40% of productivity is lost due to disorganization. So, in some ways you think about it, the clutter just leads to a lot of distraction. It interferes with that clear thinking and it creates somewhat of a chaotic, stressful environment, which obviously adds to that distraction. So, anyways, your question, why is it so difficult? I think in general, people are overwhelmed by the sum total of what needs to
Mhm.
be organized, right? They look at
Right.
their entire home and they're like, it's too much. Where do I even start? I like to say this, how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a time. And there's are some strategies for getting started where you can get some small wins along the way that help to build that confidence and that excitement. You start to get start to sense some of the benefits of having just even organized one space, and it builds upon itself. So yeah, I think that's why it's hard to get started, is because people are just overwhelmed when they look at the big picture.
Yes, I remember that. And as far as the productivity comment you just made, I will say I can literally attest to the feeling in my head of where are some things that I might have lost that might be causing me a problem because I don't remember that they're around, and so that causes mental distraction. And then the amount of time I would spend looking for something, those all took time and definitely decreased my productivity before I got things organized. Now, luckily, I have such great organizational systems, and it makes all the difference in the world. Also, on the daunting part, you know, I totally get that. It is daunting when you think about getting your whole house organized. I also know that when I used to start, I used to just go down rat holes. So I would start and then I'd find something and I'd look at it and this thing that I just found, oh, I've got to do X with this, or I've got to figure this out, or I have to make a decision about it. And then that takes time. And then hours have gone by and not very much progress has been made.
Right. That's why systems are so important. If you don't have a process or a system in mind when you're getting started, it will be easy to get derailed because, it's kind of like, a dog. It's like squirrel. You're starting, you're making a few steps, and you come across something, and you're having a difficult time making a decision with that, and then all of a sudden your focus has shifted from the goal that you had to organize this space to that one item that you're really struggling with figuring out what to do with it. So, yeah, having a system in place for the organizing process really kind of helps you to keep that forward momentum and that you don't get, bogged down with something you come across. You have already a plan for what you're going to do for those kinds of items. You're not going to address it right now, right? It's going to go into, you can kind of stage it for something you will address later at when you get done with the space that you're organizing. Something I wanted to share, we'll probably talk a bit more about what that system or process should look like, but I wanted to start off by explaining, though some people don't necessarily know what organizing means. It might mean something different to different people. And there are some clear distinctions between cleaning, decluttering, and organizing. Some folks might just lump all of those together, again, making it a much more daunting task, right? But cleaning is actually what you would think, removing the dust, removing the dirt, right? It's dusting, it's Windexing, it's vacuuming. That's what cleaning is, separate from organizing. Decluttering is really when you look at a room, you look in the space, and it's like there is something that's clearly in that room that doesn't belong there. Your mud boots are sitting in the corner of the living room. They don't belong there. That's not where they live. So, decluttering is actually a process that you typically would want to go through before you start the organizing. And organizing has a very different goal, and that is to create a functional space, a functional system so that you can find what you need when you need it, where you use it. So organizing is all about functionality, but not perfection. So just to be clear on that, it's really helpful. Like I like to explain to clients when I had clients that it is much easier to clean an organized space. It's much
Mhm.
easier to organize a decluttered space. So you kind of start with one and move on to the next. So my recommendation, I guess in the order I would put these in, is declutter first, then organize, then clean.
Yes. And I have to say that when you explained that concept to me, it was like everything settled into place in my head because I realized I was trying to do all of that at once. And
Mhm.
that's what took so much time and made it so draining. In fact, I remember I would puzzle because the house cleaners could come in and do the entire house in an hour and a half. Boom, they were in, they were out, everything was clean. And I would sit there and wonder why it takes me, a whole day just to do the kitchen. And they're doing the entire house in an hour and a half. And what I realized is that all they're doing is cleaning, and we're always picking things up for the cleaner, or we were at that time, running around, oh, the cleaners are coming, let's get things out of the spaces so that they can clean a less cluttered space. But even that distinction between decluttering and organizing has really been useful to me because just going through that decluttering process really gives a sense of accomplishment.
It does.
And
Even if you haven't really organized where you've organized what's inside the cabinets and the drawers and the closets and those kinds of things, and you haven't really established systems for keeping things organized, just that process of decluttering is already creating an environment that is more peaceful, less chaotic, less heavy, right? When you're in a cluttered space, it's important to pay attention to the feeling that you get in that space. If there's a sense of like heaviness or confusion, that's what we're trying to solve for, right? So when you declutter that space, it already really lightens your mood and your and gives you more clarity for the next stage of the process. So you can get some quick wins just by a quick declutter.
Right. And speaking of quick wins, one of the things that we were planning on doing with this video series is making a series of videos that our viewers could watch and maybe tag a project along with it. Right. So as they watch this first video, maybe they'll leave with something that they can do and then come back to the second video. So we're sort of with them, supporting them throughout the process. And with that in mind, what do you think would be the first thing that would be important for them to either know or to help them get prepared for a big, let's say, spring decluttering and organizing project?
Well, I think just sharing maybe some best practices, if they know up front, might help them as they're getting started in this process. And I'm going to kind of focus on how they might be able to get some of those quick wins, right? To start build that momentum and to make a noticeable difference pretty quickly in
Right.
their environment, right? So
So this could be about then starting to plan, just kind of getting your brain ready for the project. We don't just start on a project without a plan, because if we have a plan, then it'll decrease the chance that we'll get drained within two steps of the process,
yes,
right?
yes.
Excellent.
So, just some suggestions. You want to start with a space that is not going to be as heavy and daunting a task as, let's say, the office or the garage are like the bigger tasks, right? You want to start with something smaller. The living room would be a good example of a space where you could get started and get one of those quick wins. And as you're starting in the living room, for example, we'll go into more detail about room by room, I think later in the series, but um, it's really important to start with the macro and then move to the micro. So you're sort of starting with, let's say you have an entertainment center that has cabinets and drawers, right? So it's much easier to sort of organize what's visible, what's on the shelves and things like that before you get into the drawers that may have all the accumulation of items, right? You have to make decisions about these items. So start with macro stuff that's sort of more visible, apparent, out on shelves, on coffee tables or end tables, or in corners of the room or whatever that looks like in your space. And then eventually get to the more micro stuff where you're taking one drawer at a time, for example, and organizing the contents that are in there. Again, I mentioned it earlier that organizing isn't about perfection. The goal here really is just to make progress and to celebrate those small wins. So let's say, when I'm done with the living room, I'm going to go get a bowl of ice cream. You fill in the blank, but make it something that where you're rewarding yourself for making progress and for a job well done, and that'll just help you again to keep that momentum going, right? Another thing that's I think a really great thing to do is to invite a friend over. Nahi, you and I had so much fun when we were organizing
Mhm.
your space,
We
and
did.
we were able to talk things through. If you were evaluating where something should be stored or a system that might work, it was really good to be able to bounce those ideas off of each other and come
Mhm.
to a solution together, right? Not all systems work for all people, right? Like it's very customized based on how you live, how you think, how you use that space. So having a friend over can also be an accountability partner to make sure that you stay on track, but also will help you with some of that brainstorming on what could work well. And then
Yeah.
I think it's important always, and maybe this is actually first, is when you're in that space, take an inventory, look around. How does this space feel? And Nahid, one of your questions that you a lot of times bring up in sessions is, if you had a magic wand, right? If you had a magic wand, what would the outcome be? I would use that for your space. If I had a magic wand, what would this space feel like? What would it look like? How would it function? So you're kind of creating in your mind a vision for the finished product, right? And so that vision can help be a real motivator, right, for
Mm.
getting started. So I guess those are just a few best practices. And maybe you might have something to add based on the work that we did together.
Well, what I have to add is a couple of experiences and challenges for our viewers. So, one is it might be fun for you if you're watching this series as we post our videos to kind of go through the process yourself. And I will share a couple of things. One is I did a little living room project, a decluttering project in my living room a few weeks ago. And then I got distracted and couldn't go back to it, but I completed that one piece of it. So that's done still. So I still have a sense of momentum and I know exactly what the second step is. So having my husband there made it very easy for me because there are decisions that he had to make because some of this was his stuff. And I think people may run into that a lot where there are the kids stuff and you don't want to throw something away that's important to them, or my husband's stuff, what does he want to keep? And that can really stymie people. So I was lucky. I had my husband with me and we made the decisions together. So in about I maybe 2 hours, we got a huge box of to donate. We were very focused on decluttering, so we didn't worry about what to do to organize what we had left, but we had plenty of room so we could put it all back in the cabinets. And now we've got the big donate box. And then I knew what the next step was. I have all these vases and crystal in the cabinets. And I started to open it to start again. And I got this huge sense of drain. And I realized right away, one step at a time. I've already taken a huge bite of the elephant. Let's stop for now. So, but that's still clear in my head. That will be the next thing. So that's what I've done so far. And I wonder if we wanted to give our viewers maybe a beginning thing to do between now and the next time that they tune in. What might you suggest? And also, if you have anything that you want to say based on what I shared.
Well, I love that you're sharing about the feeling of that accomplishment, right?
Mhm.
Like you've made some progress. I'm assuming that feels good.
Yes.
It's something that perhaps you've been meaning to do for a long time, and so now it's like, okay, yes, first step.
Hmm.
I think, I want to go back to your earlier question because you asked about things that often derail folks when they're wanting to organize. I think another thing is that fear that if they get rid of something, they're going to regret it, right?
Hmm.
So it's almost kind of like FOMO, like fear of missing out. It's like, well, if I get rid of that, I'm going to miss out on being able to use it again in the future if I've gotten rid of it, right? So how do you overcome that? And this is really foundational. You have to evaluate each item based on if you love it, if you use it, or if it would be really difficult to replace if you were to get rid of it. And so you have some really clear decisions to make. Now, some of those decisions were easy for you and your husband because the video game player is broken and we have all these video games and we don't use them and we don't need them. And even if we wanted to play them, we can't because the machine's broken. So easy to get rid of those, right? If you're going to get started on a project, again, choose a space that is easier. Make it something that you maybe can complete in a day. You want the quick win, like I said. So if you start and you're making a mess and you pulled everything out and it sits for a couple of days, that's not going to feel like a win. It's actually
Right.
made the environment a bit more chaotic, right? So be realistic about how much time you have. Start small. Start with something that's not going to be really, you do not want to do photos, memorabilia, and lots of paper in your first attempt at an organizing project, right? You mentioned how you made decisions about what you were going to do with the items. You need to sort of create a staging area in your space when you're getting started. You are either going to be putting the items in a donate box or bag or whatever that may be. You're going to come across items that need to be thrown out, so have a trash bag. You may need a basket or something that's like, as you come across items and it's like, okay, that really doesn't belong in the living room. I need to find it out a different place. I kind of call that my elsewhere basket. You don't need to decide where those items go yet. Just put them in the elsewhere basket. Like the item you talked about where maybe you got derailed, right? It's like, I don't know what
Mhm.
to do with this thing. Put it in the elsewhere basket. You
I
love it, you
love
use
that.
it. You love it, you use it. You know you're not getting rid of it, but you don't have to decide about where it belongs right now. So, and then one person recently brought up, well, there's actually another category, and that is I'm going to sell it. So maybe you have your elsewhere basket and you have my Facebook Marketplace basket. You like, so you kind of want to have these already set up as you get started, make the decision about each item and leave it there. I do want to offer one just last piece of advice. There are maybe some items in that environment, in that space, that are really difficult for you to make a decision on. Let's say it's an item that was given to you by your father and he recently passed away. You don't use it. You don't really love it, but you love him and therefore you've got this emotional attachment to the inanimate object. You may want to have a staging area for items like that you can't really decide about yet. You don't want to keep it in the living room. Maybe it goes in the garage, but it's a box where you are putting items like that in a holding pattern. So you're giving yourself, let's say, 6 months to a year to go back and retrieve that item. If you don't, then you can safely part with it. Sometimes you will come across items where you absolutely just cannot pull the trigger on that decision yet. So that's kind of a backup plan to alleviate that FOMO, right? Got an insurance policy, it's still in a box in the garage, you can go retrieve it if and when you still need it.
Yeah, and one thing that I would say about that from my experience is the whole idea of not having to be perfect, right? Using the 80/20 rule, which we use for a lot of other things in life. But for organizing, I found that even with our DVDs and our movies, for the most part, we don't watch movies on DVDs anymore because we have streaming services. But at the same time, my husband had this beautiful collection of movies on DVDs that was alphabetized, and he must have had hundreds of movies. And I remember when we went through it, we got rid of some of those. But then there were a couple of very neat zip up things that had some movies left. And I thought, this isn't taking up much space. It's not disturbing anything. We'll keep it for a while because there might be another run through. And I think that has really freed me up. And just being able to say, I want to clear 40% of it, or I want to declutter 50% of it. But some of these things that are on the fence, it's okay to keep for now because I'm creating a system where I'm having fun actually combing through. And every time I go through, it's easier to get rid of things. And that really makes it easy to, when I get stopped, just maybe not deal with that decision and keep moving.
Mm-hmm. And that brings up a good point. Practice makes permanent, right? So as you practice organizing and the more wins you have under your belt and you're learning through the process, you're getting better at it. By the time you get to those more difficult spaces, you will have a really good understanding of how the whole process works, and you will find yourself being able to make decisions much more quickly than you did when you started the whole process with the first room. So yeah, so that you're learning as you go, and it's just going to benefit you in the future. Eventually, the goal is that organizing just becomes almost sort of a part of your daily routine. You do a little bit each day, you maintain instead of the space getting to the point where it's completely cluttered and out of control and feels stressful. If you can have a system in place where you're keeping up on it, you no longer have that daunting of a task, right? To start, you're going to be starting with spaces that are already semi-organized.
Right. And I have noticed that because ever since I worked with you 25 years ago, I've been reiterating, and it's so much easier for me now. I mean, even the fact that I started with a category of items that were already all in one place. It wasn't that I had some DVDs off in the storage room and some, I mean, they were already in their home. So it was really easy to say, okay, I want to get rid of 50% of what's here. So, any last words for our first getting started video that you'd like to leave our viewers with? And just so that you all know, Donna and I plan to do a series of these videos, and we hope you'll come back for the next one.
As I mentioned, I was prepping a little bit for this. Just a few last kind of random remarks. I read that the clutter in your environment actually increases cortisol in your brain, which is the stress
Wow.
hormone. So there's like science behind this, right? And cluttered homes, they are linked to fatigue and depression, and we don't want that. We don't need that. So there's some real benefits to starting this process and making progress. Again, not perfection. For me, I at this stage of my life, I think a lot about peace and emotional well-being and work-life balance and those kinds of things, right? And it is proven that organized spaces improve your focus, your sleep, and your sense of control. It makes sense if you think about it, right? If you're
It does make sense. And I've
surrounded,
experienced it. So
yes. And that visual clutter really reduces your ability to process information. It's distracting. So I'm saying this because I really want to motivate the folks who are watching this series to just get started. It's going to have so much positive effect in your life, not just with finding the things you need when you need them, but with your emotional well-being and your productivity. So let's try to get some quick wins. I want to challenge everybody to choose one space and maybe even just set aside, like, say, 2 hours to just tackle one project and then evaluate how it makes you feel.
all right. We will see everyone next time. And I am looking forward to, feel free to add in the comments what you did. I did my DVDs in my living room, but I'm going to try to get my next project done before we meet again. We'll see you all soon. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.